The Magic Apple by Rainer Sussex, illustrated by David Higham, published by Methuen Children's Books. Once in a small town called Leafvale, a very strange thing happened. It all began in Mrs. Potter's tiny garden. Every year, when Mrs. Potter picked her apples, and she gave many of them away, she left the biggest and the reddest on her tree as a way of saying thank you. Of course, the birds ate it in due course, but one year they left the apple alone. It stayed on the tree and grew and grew and grew. By the time the first snows came, the apple was so large and red and shiny that it could be seen for miles around, and crowds of people flocked to look at it. With the crowds came many traders who set up stalls. All day long they were noisily shouting, "Get your lucky apple seeds here! Buy a lucky apple balloon!" and "Lucky apple juice! Try a glass!" Mrs. Potter didn't like all the hubbub in front of her house. Her cats refused even to set paw outside. In the crowd was the mayor of Leafvale, and there was a wicked gleam in his eye. "If that's a magic apple, as it seems to be," the mayor thought, "I might perhaps make a great fortune for myself out of it. Ha! I have a plan." And he chuckled craftily. He called a meeting of the town council. "Gentlemen," he said, "it is our duty to see that this wonderful apple brings fortune to the whole town. Now, here is what I propose. As Mrs. Potter's garden is so small, it is obvious that the roots of the apple tree must grow in the land outside her garden. Now, that land belongs to the town. It follows that the apple belongs to the people and not just to Mrs. Potter." "Nonsense," said Councillor Rambo, who never agreed with the mayor about anything. "It's Mrs. Potter's tree and no one else's." But the council agreed with the mayor. They always did. So several of them went with him to Mrs. Potter's house. They showed her a proclamation they had drawn up and took the apple away in a hand-cart lined with cushions so that the apple would not be bruised. "If it's a magic apple, I wonder what it can do," thought the mayor. And he went secretly to consult old Mother Rankin, who was the oldest inhabitant of the town and very eccentric. She lived with hundreds of parrots in a spooky-looking house with lots of odd turrets. When he knocked on the door, a hoarse voice called, "Come in!" Then 100 and more voices began squawking, "Come in, come in, come in!" But old Mother Rankin saw that the mayor was a nasty, greedy man, and she wouldn't help him. She said, yes, it was a magic apple, but if he wanted to know what it could do, he must find out. "Find out, find out, find out!" squawked the parrots, and the mayor was nearly deafened by the din. Some of the birds flew at him, and he got out of the house as quickly as he could. "Perhaps Mrs. Potter's tree has produced magic apples before," the mayor thought when he got home. "There might be a record of it in the town archives." So he took Councillor Rambo down to the cellars under the town hall and ordered him to search. The cellars were full of mice, and they had chewed all the books and papers, and nibble here and nibble there. Left alone in the cellars, Councillor Rambo grew angrier and angrier as he worked through the night. It was morning before he found what he was looking for. "Apple tree magic," he read. But when he got to the bottom of the page, he tore off a few lines as if a mouse had nibbled them. "I'll teach that mayor a lesson," he said. The mayor was delighted with what Councillor Rambo had found. Next day, the apple was displayed on a platform in the town square. "My good people," the mayor announced, "I have found out—" "He means I've found it out," muttered Rambo. "That this is indeed a magic apple, and whoever takes the first bite, his wish will come true. As your mayor, it is only right that I should take that first bite. I will now go and discuss with the council what wish would do most good for the town." The mayor and council went to the town hall and argued for hours and hours over what the wish should be. One wanted gold lamp-posts for the town. Another, who was very fond of children, asked for a fountain in the square which would gush out fizzy lemonade all day. One suggested magnificent new clothes with plenty of gold braid for all the councillors. Suddenly they heard shouting and the clang and clatter of a fire engine. They rushed out. The town flour mill was blazing fiercely. The firemen and townsfolk worked like beavers, but the sails of the mill went up in flames and the roof fell in. It was the end of the mill. "That settles it," said the councillors, agreeing at last. "We must wish for a new mill." They all gathered in the town hall next day, and the mayor took a bite of the apple, silently making his wish. But it wasn't for a new mill. No, his wish was that all the barrels in his cellar might be filled with gold coins. At that very moment, the big red apple began to shrink till it was no bigger than an ordinary apple. Everyone looked in amazement. But Rambo burst out, "I know what this means. I kept back the piece of paper which said that if someone made a selfish wish, the giant apple would shrink, the apple tree would die, and the wish would not come true." When the angry people realized that the mayor had not wished for a new mill, but for gold just for himself, they chased him out of the town, and he never came back. They made Councillor Rambo mayor instead. Mrs. Potter took the apple home in her basket. Mrs. Potter was very sad when her apple tree died, but she took a seed from the core of the shrunken apple and planted it in her garden. "Perhaps I shall have a new apple tree one day," she said. The next morning, when Mrs. Potter looked into her garden, she couldn't believe her eyes. During the night, the seed had grown into a big new apple tree. Right at the top was a large apple of pure gold. And every year after that, the tree had dozens and dozens of bright red apples, but when they were all picked, and of course the birds had their share, there at the top of the tree was one made of gold. A thank you for Mrs. Potter.